Hello, good morning. Well, it's not morning anymore actually, it's Saturday, the 18th of December, and an exciting day for me. I'm going to facilitate in a lovely solstice event tonight at the Ancient Technology Center. Anyway, so I have been reading, I think I've done 4 readings so far of a book called Bliss, Afterlife. Something I started to write in 2006 when I was traveling a lot, and I've been writing it over the last 15 years on and off, and I haven't published it, and I decided to read it. I am now at chapter 17, entitled Alexey. Alexey has spent a while in a deep rest. Yes, she finished with her role. She was at her place of happiness, talking about bliss. Chapter 17, Alexey. Alexey has spent a while in a deep rest, and when it is time to join him, when it is time, I join him to face his group elders. I can feel that he's becoming more accustomed to the feeling of spirit. Here you are again. How was your life, Alexey? It is often the custom to address new souls by their last name of incarnation. Alex is in a lovely room with 6 elders, 6 elder guides around him. I am by his side as he will want my help. I have been his guide before, and I know he will be feeling a sense of failure. He had changed his life path. I was there when he came back from a previous incarnation. He had lived a life of abject poverty, where he died of malnutrition due to the potato famine in Ireland. He was the mother of 6 children who had all died. Her husband had left his family to live in America. He had a long rest, and when his new life path was chosen, it was to be the life of a Russian entrepreneur who would live a life in the new Russia. One of his ambitions was to use his life to help those who are hungry and starving. Alexey was silent. He's only slowly remembering his incarnation and the configuration of his previous choices. We have all absolute free will. Our Creator has always allowed us to absolutely create the environment we live in. All actions we take in the physical life are of our own choosing. As we think, so we shall be. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Did I ever get this last one wrong? I was totally carried away with the ability to create wealth. I never thought. How could I forget? Why did you let me forget? How could you let me do these things? Why do you make it so difficult for us? Why could you not have reminded me? Oh no. I promised myself I would live my life with love and understanding. I promised myself that I would consider my higher consciousness. How could you do this to me? Nevratin, the oldest guide in our circle, looked kindly at Alexey and was sending him some warm energy. Alexey was utterly distraught, as the realization hit him that his last life had not fulfilled his desire to improve his soul. He had taken other lives in order to succeed himself. He had ordered the death of 3 of his opponents in business, and it was clear to all of us that Alexey probably presented the worst kind of businessman there was in today's high living and wealthy society in Moscow. He had yet to look through his life book, but his initial greeting was in preparation of the work he needed to do. Alexey, you know well that we are not responsible for you. You should know better than to accuse us. You know well that the actions you take are yours and yours alone. It is not up to us to remind you, remember? Let me go back. Let me go back straight away. Let me go where I can make up for what I did. Can I go right now? I almost laughed out loud. I was always surprised how long it took for a soul to reach a deep understanding of the true sense of the path of all lives, and the reason for Earth existences. I've lived many lives. After all, I have been around for thousands of years of relative airs counting, and the learning does not need to be quick. Alexey was a relatively young soul, but he has lived many lives already. Many of his lives were spent in difficult circumstances. His soul found it difficult to connect with his earthbound body, but during his last incarnation, he had been determined to improve his inner listening. He had chosen good parents, law-abiding people with a regular income, and the realization that he did not use any of these opportunities he had chosen was a shock to him. I never gave myself time to think deeply about anything at all, except how to make more money. I was not even very happy. Most of my time was spent protecting myself from people trying to take it all away from me. Suddenly he laughed. How ironic. I know what you mean with my own responsibility. I was a miserable sod. I was not very nice to women. Somehow I always needed to prove my superiority. I need to consider, will you help me? Of course, Alexey, this is why we are here. You know well how we proceed now. We will let you return to your soul group so you can spend some time in the company of your equals. You will proceed to consider your life when you are ready to do so, and then, as always, you will learn to help yourself. Alexey's soul sparkled, and he slowly regained a sense of himself as the being he can be and was. The thought of his soul group obviously filled him with great joy. It does to all of us. The feeling of connection with your group of friends is something we are longing for. Did I write this? In our Earth existence, often without knowing what this feeling is. We parted from the elders, and I took Alexey along the street to meet his group. He was greeted with great hilarity and laughter. The whole group tried to make him feel better about himself. It will take time for him to forgive himself, but the meeting with his group was a joyful experience. I loved watching the recognition of group members whose path had crossed in the last incarnation. Alexey recognized one of his own victims, and the mental embrace was very emotional. He will need a lot of healing to right his own wrongs. The realization that there is no hell and no punishment by a being called God is often the first step to taking responsibility for the soul one is. I watched as Alexey was enclosed in his circle of friends and connected with a part of his soul which remains forever here. This will, as always, allow him to understand the deep complexity of existence, and he will be ready to examine his life very soon, with the ability to see everything in context. He will have learned many lessons again, but he had failed to remember anything in his last life that he had wished for himself. A life on earth is never for nothing. All experiences are made for a reason, and sometimes we know that there is a higher purpose to which we are here. To which we even here in the afterlife have no knowledge. Oh, I see. A life on earth is never for nothing. All experiences are made for a reason, and sometimes we know that there is a higher purpose to which we, even here in this afterlife, have no knowledge yet. But the realization that the progress we ourselves had hoped to live was missed can be a hard lesson indeed for our being. Chapter 18. Holly regains her peace. Holly had made herself comfy on her mother's daybed. She had lit the candles and made a peaceful atmosphere for herself again. Her mother had gone 2 years now, and even though everyone had got used to a life without her, she still missed the physical presence of her mum whenever she came here. Susan and her had decided to keep the flat. It was a lovely refuge for both of them, and it had become a place where friends stayed occasionally, and even some of Susan's waifs and strays had stayed here for the odd night when nothing else was available. The last 18 months had been very hectic. What's new, she thought. Life never seemed to slow down. Tony had finished his university degree. He had decided to spend a year abroad and was presently considering his options. Her husband Chris had retired, lucky him, but seems to be busier than ever, and had got himself involved in Susan's refuge, where a handyman was always useful. How did she ever function without his help, she mentioned the other day. It was nice, really, as it had brought her and Susan closer together. They always thought it was their mum who organized the togetherness. As it turned out, they did very well by themselves. Holly always had this sense of tranquility when she came to her mum's flat. She loved to sit and meditate on the daybed, and always felt calm and understanding when she gave herself the time to reflect. Her regular practice of meditation was something she had learned from her mum, who was a great believer of the power of meditation and the power it gave the mind. She had her best inspirations when she sat quietly just listening to her own thoughts, and she often wondered how other people who always pooh-poohed the idea of meditating as New Age nonsense managed to live a balanced life. She smiled. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth, as meditation was a practice which was much older than most things people are readily accepting in their lives now. It was also something so utterly natural that she never understood why it was not taught as a regular practice in every school in the country. Her mum had often pondered why people were so happy to accept all new technology and advancement in medicine and science, but the practice of a regular time to oneself, with some positive guided meditation, was often considered a waste of time. Her mum had for many years been what could be described a high-powered businesswoman, although Bliss herself hated this expression, as she always thought this nonsense, and always said that she was not callous enough to make the big bucks. Nevertheless, she was well-traveled and never thought twice about going to Russia or India, Pakistan, Algeria, South America, usually on her own. She never failed to take her CD player and later MP3 player, and there was hardly a day that Bliss did not meditate, particularly on her travels. She had become more and more interested in the whole matter of soul consciousness. Holly was lost in memories as she tried to remember how it had all started, and the one thing she did know was that her Opie, her mother's father, had been a really lovely man, and when he became very ill, how old was she when this happened? Maybe 10 or 11. Her mum rushed to Germany one morning. It was really hot outside, and she would never forget the panic and despair on her mum's face. Her granddad had totally unexpectedly fallen into a coma due to pneumonia, which had been discovered too late or something. Her mum had been in Germany for 3 weeks and spent a lot of time in the hospital with her sister Barry and Omi, Holly's grandmother. When her mum came back from her first trip of many visits, she decided to learn how to practice Reiki, the ancient Japanese hands-on healing. Her mum loved her Reiki, and she would give it whenever asked by friends or family. She took the 2nd degree, and as far as Holly knew, her mum practiced it daily on herself, usually during meditation. Well, her mum was always a bit tight-lipped about it. It seemed a very personal matter. Anyhow, one thing Holly did know was that her mum was hardly ever ill. In fact, Holly could not remember her mum ever being seriously ill, apart from the odd hangover. She did like a party. She thought her mum took this practice very seriously, so she had spent lots of it. She had adopted herself, and she lived her life fairly serenely, even if she thought so herself. She always enjoyed a really nice laze. Holly thought of her mum and her Opie and her Omi, and she smiled. Lucky me. Those are my ancestors. She could hear Susan at the door. Hiya. Gosh, that looks cozy. Let me share this. And she plonked herself on the sofa, giving the room a totally different atmosphere altogether. But that was great. She had started to get a bit maudlin, and her sister was a good one for getting her out of this mood. We miss her, don't we? Yes, but in a nice way, right? Yes. And they looked across the sea, dragged a little drag on the joint, and thought, bliss. That's the end of chapter 18.